This video will take us through basic proofing on the Vandercook No. 0. Here's the press. Very simple, heavy, flat, with a roller sitting on rails. We're going to start with our form locked up in a chase and sitting on a galley tray. The galley tray is important. Without the galley tray, your type won't be high enough on this press to take an impression. We actually have a special metal tray that we can place underneath form or bare type so that we don't have to use the tray. We could actually set up type or whatever we want directly on the bed, as it were. I'm using some really strong magnets to ensure that in this case our galley tray is held in place and also our chase is held in place. We don't want things to move when we're using this press. It's a very simple press, and as a result we have fairly simple solutions to make it work. The little pieces of fabric that are kept underneath these bigger magnets are there to help you get the magnet off the metal when you're done. Otherwise, it's really difficult. The next key to using this press for a basic proof is to use carbon paper. You'll find the carbon paper in the box in the shelf under the press, and it's two-sided. So to use this stuff, you have your form sitting on the press. You make sure that all of your letters or whatever it is that you have set up there is flat. And you place the carbon paper like this with the black side up. Now I'm using a piece of scrap paper, but good paper, and I place that on top. I'll then place some packing material, which is essentially different thicknesses of cardboard. As a starting point, I like 2 sheets. This is just a piece of Mayfair, and then this is a manila paper that goes over top that we use as tympan. This one's well used, as you can see. So with your paper and your tympan placed carefully on top of the form, you're going to grab a hold of the carriage and pull it across in one fluid motion. You should feel some resistance as you pass over the form, but if it stops, or if you hear a crunch, you need to stop because something has gone wrong. And there is our impression. It's really faint, and that is on account of using carbon paper. Carbon paper here simply gives us the opportunity to see what we have printed. Now, I have noticed a mistake. I've noticed that I'd used an H instead of an N in this particular line. So back to the cabinet I go, and luckily I found another N. So I can swap them out right on the press. I need my coin key. I'll loosen the coins. That will permit just enough wiggle room to remove the offending letter. If the type itself is large enough, you might be able to do this with your fingers, but if not, you use tweezers. Just be careful with the tweezers. They can really help you to get little letters out, but they could also damage the face of the type, and we want to avoid that. So just be careful and try to grip around the letter, not the top of it. It may take you a couple of tries, but it's best to be gentle rather than to pinch too hard. Once I wiggle the letter out, in this case, the H and the N are the same width, and I'll simply replace them and then carefully retighten the form using the coin key. Check where the nick is. I want to make sure I don't have a U there by accident. Slide that letter in, adjust side to side, and tighten. One last check to make sure that none of the letters have pushed up during the loosening and tightening process, and we're ready for another proof, just like before. Carbon paper first, black side up, a piece of paper to print on, some packing and tympan material, pull the carriage across, and inspect your form again. Now we're hoping that all of our letters look good. We're hoping that the form is centered the way I have attempted to center it. And I could stop there, knowing full well that I could move to the C&P press and begin editioning this in a larger sense if I wanted to. But the other neat thing about this little press is that you can use it for printing. We have a whole bunch of inks that are special for letterpress. I'm using a violet ink here, and a small brayer that hangs on the end of the press table, and I can ink it right in the press. This is not like inking in litho. You ink very, very lightly. You have a very, very small amount of ink, relatively speaking, on your roller. And you don't push down very hard. You just skim across the surface several times and take an impression. Because you have ink on here, you want to be careful not to move the paper around or you'll smudge it. Now, I'm not too worried because this is simply an impression. I want to see what it looks like with a little bit of color. So I'm not worried about a perfect printing. But it's possible to print very, very fine things on this very, very simple machine. So I move my Timpan and my packing out of the way and carefully remove my printing paper and inspect my type once more. How does it look? A little smudgy in spots, but that's not a problem. But oh my goodness, there are 2 F's in the word professor, and my shame knows no bounds. So I'm going to check it against my original plan. Maybe I misspelt it there. I didn't. So I got a little excited when I was setting my type and stuck 2 F's in. It happens. But this is why we proof. Much better to catch this now than to catch it on the big press with 100 sheets in. So same thing. You loosen up your form, you extract the offending letter, and in this case, because I'm not replacing it with a different letter, I actually have a bit more space that I need to make up. So looking for an appropriate spacer with the same point size as the font we're working in, I slide my type around. In this case, I'm just sticking it on the end. Drop it into place, tighten up the form, and we'll ink one more time. I think it's important to note that because you're inking manually, you're using a roller. Again, I mentioned it before, but a light touch is important. But you are entirely in charge of how much ink goes down. You are entirely in charge of how much pressure. So go slow, be methodical, be careful, and you'll get the best possible impression off of, again, what is a very, very simple device. And finally, a much better impression than the last time. A little smudging, but again, this is not meant to do anything other than testing in this particular case. My spacing, my centering, my spelling, my grammar, all of that stuff looks good. So if I'm finished, now I can clean up. I use the same kind of rag that we use for cleaning the rollers on the C&P press. A little bit of soy clear, just a little bit, and in a very light, quick motion, I glance over the surface of the type. It's best to keep the type locked up so it doesn't move around. You never ever pour a cleaner of any kind directly onto the type because it makes a real mess. And I could take this off the press and move it over to the imposing table or a work table to do this if I wanted to, but right on the press is perfectly fine. Once I'm done, I'll remove my magnets, and I'll take my galley tray and my chase off the press. Carbon paper is reusable. I've got a box full of it. It's not easy to come by these days, but we can reuse it over and over and over again. So when you're done, please put it back in the box and then slide it into the little shelf underneath the press. Timpan material, packing material can all go under there as well. There's some smaller sheets, and you'll find a couple of pieces of extra wood here. They could be used for building up a form directly on the press. Cleaning is very, very straightforward. In this case, I have a very small amount of ink, and it never hurts to see this another time. So razor blade to take up the bulk, a bit of vegetable oil, a gray studio rag, and almost all evidence of the ink is gone except for a greasy residue. I can use the rag with that same bit of oil on it to clean up the palette knife. I'll spray some vinegar on the table, on the knife, and using a blue shop towel, finish up the cleaning process. There's the shelf with all the letterpress ink I was talking about. The small rubber roller gets cleaned in the usual way, and you hang it on the hooks on either side of the press table when you're done. Put away anything else that's left laying around, extra type, clean your workstation, and you're done.